Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. Mr. Secretary, great to have you on the show this morning.
Hey, great to be with you. Well, it's really something. I'm actually in Montana enjoying to get out of the swamp, and you're exactly right. They're very angry, and truth doesn't matter to these people anymore. You saw, the president nearly get assaulted by a CNN reporter, and it's the same. They just are so Machiavellian. They'll resort to all means to justify their end, and America's not having it.
So when people see this headline in Politico this morning, again quoting anonymous sources, of course, Zinke prepares to leave Trump's cabinet. What do you tell folks back here in Montana when they read headlines like that?
You know what? I do my job. I disregard the BS. It comes from the same liberal reporters that have lost their ability to tell the truth. Anonymous sources. Here's one for you. I think I'm going to probably be the commander of Space Command. How's that one?
Now, that'd be a great get to be the new Space Force commander.
It's this constant drilling where there's the left-wingers, they get with the media, and there's media groups in Montana that have nothing better to do. The entire organizations are about attacking Zinke, right? So what happens is they invent a story, they try to sell it, and it goes all the way up to the Washington Post, the New York Times. There's no truth to it. It's just a series of allegations as reported. But you look at the accomplishments of Interior. We're now the world's largest oil and gas producer. We'll never be held hostage again by foreign nations for our energy, nor will have to send our troops overseas to fight for energy. We've increased conservation. About 1 million acres, by the way, in Montana have increased hunting opportunities, opened up 38 wildlife refuges to hunting and fishing. Our safety record offshore is record-breaking. We've looked at corridors for wildlife. We're reorganizing. Just the list of accomplishments in less than 2 years is unprecedented. But yet they can't report on that. It's always about some made-up story, and I think most Americans get it.
Well, and I know folks across Montana get it. I mean, they've seen what you do not only for domestic oil and gas production or expanding access on our federal lands, but also, helping. I'm here at the Farm Bureau convention taking place in Billings. We saw how you responded when the fires devastated so many ranches across eastern Montana, and you opened up, the CMR to grazing. But also, we know about some of those public lands types deals that you've been working on. But also, there's this news that came out yesterday under Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. The arrests of illegal aliens, when we talk about our southern border, the arrests of illegal aliens on federal borderlands increased by nearly 4,000% under these Trump and Zinke surge operations. I think a lot of people forget how the southern border also plays a role here, too.
Well, Interior has about 40% of the southern border of their territory. Of course, we have some great parks down there. We also have about 4,000 law enforcement professionals with Interior. And we surged forward. We're in support of DHS doing our job to make sure that there is no penetration across, our lands. And I've always said, a nation without borders can't be a nation. So it is a national security to protect our nations. I'm all for immigration. It just should be legal, orderly. We should know who's coming in this country. But this idea that you're going to have a porous border that anyone at any time can show up, and these nut jobs that think that ICE should be eliminated. Hey, in these bigger cities, I tell you, they take murderers off the streets. And ICE does a great job, but when the local governments refuse to cooperate with getting criminals off the street, and some of these guys are bad people. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, organized crime. ICE needs to be able to go in and keep our nation safe. So we're absolutely serious about it. But this is what the liberals don't want to hear. They don't want to hear about border protection. They don't want to hear about increasing public access. And they want to hear about wildlife corridors and reorganization and infrastructure for our park system. They don't want to hear about grazing on federal land. Or they don't want to hear about oil and gas. And look, we're all the above. We've also we're in process with largest, offshore wind lease on the East Coast, our first one on the West Coast. I'm all the above. I just want it made in America so our troops, your grandkids, my grandkids, your kids don't have to deploy overseas and fight for energy. We can do it better, more environmentally conscious, morally and economically. It's important for energy, and that's what the president is focused on. He is winning the issues. It's just the liberal media, as you know, they just are beside themselves.
About a minute before we take a quick break here as we talk with Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke exclusively on Montana Talks. Any reaction, now this liberal federal judge in Great Falls put a halt to the Keystone XL pipeline, speaking of energy. Any reaction to that? Because we got pipe already on the ground ready to roll here in Montana.
Well, it's a tragedy. You look, I grew up in Whitefish, and you look what the economy has done in Lincoln County, struggling. And there's places to mine, there's places not to mine. Now, I withdrew a mineral withdrawal off of Immigrant in Paradise Valley for a reason. That's a place not to mine. But there are a lot of places where you can mine environmentally conscious. You can do it right. And pipelines, the same argument. It is better to put material through a pipeline than it is to rail. And it is better to produce energy in this country under reasonable regulation than watch it get produced overseas with none. And these radical judges, and this is why it was so important for the president to hold the Senate, because he's done more on getting the right judges that at least look at the law. That's all it's asked, is just follow the law.
Mr. Secretary, really appreciate you joining us while you're back here in Montana. We were talking earlier about how, the media, quoting anonymous sources, saying that you might be out. Sounds like you're far from getting ready to leave the Trump cabinet and the Trump administration. I want to get your thoughts, if you can weigh in on the recent elections. You talked a little bit about the Senate, but I know there's a lot of folks that I'm hearing from across Montana who were really glad that you accepted the job as Secretary of the Interior. You're doing great work there. But some of them also are saying, man, if Ryan Zinke were the Senate candidate a few days ago, we probably would have won that Senate seat. Any thoughts from you on that?
Well, of course, the president asked me to run several times, and the penalty would be I'd be in the Senate. So I enjoy the Interior. You can get a lot done, and look at with accomplishments in the last 2 years. Certainly, as Interior, we've done great things, and we continue to do great things. So I enjoy working for the president. If you do your job, he supports you. He's great to work for. I tell you, every time I've asked him for something, he's delivered. But he's a business guy, so he'll call at 2:00 in the morning if he has a question, and all you got to do is your job. And I agree with the president's agenda on energy independence. I agree on infrastructure. I agree on what he's trying to do is transform this swamp in Washington, D.C. into a working government. And I think one of the best accomplishments in the last 2 years is this president has given rural states a voice again on sage grouse, on ESA, on water, and returned the government for the people by listening to local communities about health of our forests again, active forest management. As Interior, I got a bill for $870 million. That's not fighting forest fires. That's just repairing banks and watersheds and the infrastructure that got burned from this last forest season. It's time to do active management again and public access. The previous administration, they said they were for public access, but they shut trails, they shut roads. And look, there's a lot of elderly that want to get out in the woods and enjoy the outdoors. And our public lands belongs to the people and not special interests. And so the president,
and by the way, you're putting the roof back up on the Sperry Chalet and rebuilding that thing and not getting bogged down in planning and scientific analysis before just fixing the dang building and putting a roof on it, huh?
But the farm bill's coming up. I talked to Sonny Perdue yesterday. Obviously, it's a big priority on his list. He's feeling pretty confident that we'll get it over the finish line in Congress, which is good news for Montana. It's not a perfect bill, but it's a good bill. And sometimes in D.C. you got to go with good, because if you're looking for a perfect bill, there's not many of them that exist.
Secretary Zinke, I know you got a big, busy schedule and got to run. Maybe a final question for you here. I'm already seeing speculation via Twitter on the Montana Politics hashtag, but is there any chance folks can convince you to run for governor back and come back for 2020 at all, or are you going to keep getting the job done back in Washington?
Well, you can hear it first in your show. I am not going to run for governor. We have some exciting candidates that I will support. I'm gonna continue doing this job and doing good things. I love Montana. What a great state. What God's blessing has given Montana. But I am not going to run for governor. I think there's some great candidates out there, and I look forward to supporting them.
All right. Well, Mr. Secretary, appreciate you joining us this morning. Thanks for the phone call.
Hey, you're very welcome. God bless America.
All righty.